travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. I'm my loyal listeners. Thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Doug Drexler returns to the mothership to discuss his documentary, Trek Star. Now come aboard as we're traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Drexler. Are you coming back to the Versus Stars podcast?
I was wondering when the heck you were going to ask me back. For God's sake, what took you so long?
I know. I mean,
Are we on the air?
Well, I mean, we did such a good job the last time, and this is the perfect moment to have you back on the show, which is very exciting because you're having a whole documentary devoted to the greatness of Doug Drexler. So, here's a question. You've been part of Star Trek directly and indirectly since the 70s.
Yeah, all my life, really.
Right. It basically has been connected to you intrinsically for such a long time of your life. So what does Star Trek mean to you?
Well, I mean, it depends on what level you're talking about. I mean, as far as being an influence in life, oh my God. I mean, Star Trek literally made me who I am, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, it's nuts. And thank goodness, I in the business I'm in, I have some awards like Oscars and Emmys and stuff like that. When you have those things, you're free to be a big geek in front of the world, and no one can make fun of you. You know, well, what it means to me is it's like I said, it literally formed my entire life. I mean, right now I'm 72 years. I'll be 73 in March, and looking back now, I mean, I can look back and say, oh my God, Star Trek was so influential. It was like everything I did. You know, I was into makeup and all kinds of stuff, and it was because of Star Trek. So Star Trek introduced me to the first love of my life, which was Dorothy. It was because of Star Trek. So many friends, Mike Westmore and Herman Zimmerman and the Okudas, and these people are family. And here we are, how many years later, and we still see each other on a weekly basis and adore each other.
Well, I think it's fairly interesting because you said Star Trek kind of made you, but you've been part of Star Trek since the early 90s directly. So you've kind of been making Star Trek. So is Star Trek more making you, or have you made more for Star Trek at this point?
I've had a hand in making Star Trek something that they were interested in revisiting, the studios, I mean, we had a store in Manhattan called the Federation Trading Post when no one cared about Star Trek and no one was suing us. They didn't even care. But we promoted the show at 53rd and 3rd in Manhattan. We had, news crews come in, and that, especially in New York, that ripples out to everywhere. And people see that and of course they were running syndicated Star Trek at that time, that's where things really started to take off. We did a Star Trek magazine. It was the first Star Trek magazine. It was a Star Trek poster book. It was like 1977 or something like that. Anybody who was doing anything in Star Trek, whether it was novelizations or comic books, or they would bring it to the Federation Trading Post, to us, to look it over and see if it was authentic. So it was like there was a while there where basically we were in charge of the franchise. It was totally crazy. The poster book was, a lot of people, especially remember those poster books. It treated Star Trek very seriously. It unfolded into a big poster with articles on one side. And we had the best people who knew the most about Star Trek. Alan Asherman, for one. I mean, Alan, when the show was still on the air, the first article I ever read about Star Trek was in a magazine called Castle of Frankenstein. It was a horror magazine like Forrest J. Ackerman used to do, like Famous Monsters of Filmland. I'll never forget reading it. It was like mind-boggling to me as a kid. And Alan, was a writer on the poster books. So those books really meant a lot to people because they recognized that whoever was doing it really loved it. You know,
And,
it's pretty obvious when someone is just doing a job.
hmm.
You know what I mean? It doesn't come across as honest, and you don't make that childhood connection. Man, I go to conventions and run into people, and it's like the shared childhood that steps in all of a sudden, and I totally feel like I've known you for a long time.
Well, I think one of the coolest things, because like I said before the interview, I did some background on you and some of the stuff that you've worked on, and you got to do some of the coolest things, which is recreate the original bridge of the Enterprise in the episode, in the homage episodes, Relics. You also got to do Trials and Tribulations for Deep Space Nine. You got to do A
Yeah,
Mirror Darkly for Enterprise. What was it
yeah.
like for you to be able to recreate the original bridges of the
Well, of
Enterprise?
course, when you count in people like me and Michael Kuda and Denise, and who are so original series people, to get to recreate that stuff was the first time. I mean, we did it a little bit in Relics, but when we did Trials and Tribulations, when we heard there was a possibility, they wanted to do you know, I forgot how many years it had been, 40th anniversary or
Hmm.
something like that, do a Tribble show. But before that, there was talk about other things that they might do. They thought about going back to the planet in Piece of the Action, the Oceans, and that this time they go back and now everyone's dressed like Kirk and Spock, and it's like a big Star Trek convention. And we were like, And somebody came up with I don't know who it was exactly, I can't remember, came up with the idea of going back to Tribbles, which is one of the most beloved shows. Even if you don't like Star Trek, you know about Tribbles.
Hmm.
And so to recreate those sets, I mean, we didn't create the bridge in the round. We made, those pieces were designed so that you could shoot over here with one piece, and then you could shoot over here and just flop the film or whatever to make it the other side. And they used to do that on the show.
Hmm.
That's what we did the first time. We did the corridors, and we did a couple of pieces of the bridge, turbo lift, um, and we were in hog heaven. I mean, we couldn't even, and people were coming from all over the place to see it. Bob Justman came down, Walter Koenig came down, just to, take in it was a time travel crazy experience for people. Um, I remember me, Mike, and Denise were standing at an intersection in the corridor, and one of us said, "This must have been just the way it was." It was lit. Jonathan West had just got done lighting it, and a voice from above comes down and says, "It's exactly the way it was. I was there." And there was a grip up in the permanence who worked on the original series.
Nice.
That's crazy.
That is awesome, and it must be such an amazing thing to go from being a fan to being an integral part of this franchise, this universe. And as we're going to discuss, there's a documentary called Trek Star that's going to be focused largely on you as being this integral member of the Star Trek behind the scenes for since Next Generation, when you were working with Patrick Stewart. I think it was I read it was like the Shakespeare episode, and you also did the Inner Light episode when
Yeah.
you had to age him up. So what was it? What is it like to know you went from fan to being part of the actual franchise?
I mean, of course, it's insane, but I came into the show in a way that was impossible. I wasn't just someone who wanted to be on the show. Uh, by the time I went over to TNG, we had worked with Warren Beatty on Dick Tracy. Now, people don't remember after a certain age how powerful Warren Beatty was and how important he was
Hmm.
in Hollywood. And anything that Warren Beatty did was like huge. And so we had just done that. We were nominated for an Academy Award. I could go to Star Trek and feel like a big shot. Everyone was happy I was there. I could talk about being a geek in front of all of them. And if I was anybody else, that might be a red flag because they had people break into the sets, and they were cautious about. Uh, they were cautious when it came. There were some fans that were. I mean, I'm sure you've seen videotapes on YouTube about people sneaking on the stage at night, you know. I mean, sometimes, I mean, one weekend, like $8,000 worth of uniforms disappeared.
Oh, wow.
One weekend, Picard's chair was left in an alley and was taken.
Wow.
So, but I could go in to the show and be a big geek, and they were proud of it. You know what I mean?
Well, can you verify the story for me? The story that I heard, and I'm trying to remember where I read it. It might have been on the Star Trek Wiki, it might have been on your website. After you had won your Academy Award for makeup, LeVar Burton used to give you crap on the set every time you came on to the set about your Academy Award. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, every time he would see me, he would. I mean, think about this: LeVar Burton in his Geordie outfit would see me across the street or on the stage, and Michael Dorn did this in a different way. He would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award-winning Doug Drexler," no matter where. And and I loved it. There were times though where I wish he hadn't. It would be embarrassing. There was one time I was walking down the street in Studio City on Ventura Boulevard, and some guy comes racing around the corner. We run into each other, and I look at it, it's like LeVar. And without missing a beat, he turns to the whole street in Studio City and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award winning." Michael Dorn used to love my name. I spent a lot of time with Dorn. I mean, look, one of the things about being a makeup artist that none of the other things that I have done come close to is you live with the cast.
Mm.
You're with them all the time. So you really get to know them. And that's really, really wonderful, especially with this crew, because I found that it really was singular. I mean, I'd been on a bunch of movies and stuff before that, and the kind of togetherness and friendships and in the trenches together, I never felt it like I did on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they were hilarious. I mean, these people were funny. Jonathan Frakes was, I mean, he was one of the funniest ones of all, and Michael Dorn was a nut. Whenever he would see me, he would always bellow my name like 3 times in a row. Drexler, Drexler, Drexler. It was hilarious. And even to today, I wrote him a couple of weeks ago asking him if he'd be interviewed for the documentary. And the email comes back, Drexler, Drexler, Drexler. I mean, he still remembers after how many decades?
Right.
So there's a real family feeling on Next Generation. I'm not saying that there wasn't on DS9 or Voyager, because I wasn't in the makeup department. So I wasn't that privy to on-set relationships and friends and stuff like that. But TNG was really, really super special. I mean, first of all, I was a big fan before I got there. You know, there was season 1 and 2, and I was a big fan. Even through some of the weakness of season 1 and 2, I knew that the show was on the right track, and I was really proud of it. It seemed like the original series slightly grown up, because the original series had to cater to the kind of stuff that they loved on TV in the 60s. The hero making out with the girl and cowboy fist fights and stuff. I mean, can you even imagine Picard having a fist fight like Kirk used to have in the 60s? You can't.
Right.
And so that makes you love it more, because you realize that the people behind the scenes are growing and understanding just like you are. That's really freaking awesome.
And the other thing that you mentioned about a makeup art, for listeners that may not realize, when you're applying some of this makeup to like Michael Dorn, Patrick Stewart, something like that, especially when you're doing special effects, you're in the chair with these guys for hours, absolute hours, and you can't.
You're with them all day long, every minute, because makeup is fragile and it starts falling apart immediately.
So how much? I mean, so obviously you're extremely skilled, but how much is it also a skill to just not be an a-hole? So people want to work with you all day, every day, be around you all day, every day. Because obviously there's other people who can do it, but you got to also be someone who the actors want to be with.
That's a great question, and most people don't ask me that. Yes, that is absolutely true. You have to be empathetic. You have to be a creative partner and help them discover who their character is. I mean, I worked on a lot of characters on Next Generation for Mike Westmore. Believe it or not, and there was no internet.
Mm.
We had actors who were Klingons, had no idea what a Klingon was, or what are they like? How do they speak? I would give them back because I'm a Star Trek expert. I could give the actors expert background on who these characters are. If you're a Klingon, what does it mean to be a Klingon? What is the acting like for a Klingon? I always said, look, remember the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, the bigger than life, no contractions when you speak. You can't go too big. And they would go, oh, okay. What was his name? Oh, was it Martok?
Hertzler.
No, not Hertzler. Oh my God. He bulged his eyes. He looked like a thermometer.
Gowron. He played Gowron.
Yeah, you see that? I mentioned the bulging eyes, and you knew who I was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do his makeup, but I watched him on stage. And when he would come off the stage, the first time he was there, I said, when you bulge your eyes like that, you look like a thermometer about to pop. You should keep doing that. Worf's brother, Tony Todd. Worf's brother. Tony Todd, we just lost him a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I
did his makeup as Worf's brother, and he loved my feedback. He wanted to hear what I thought, the one thing I remember about him was Kern, that was his name. He would hit the T's really hard. Acting, Ensign, Wesley Crusher, acting, And I said, boy, when you hit the T's, it's really like your own thing. And so he continued to do that. And I think he went on to be like a star in the Candyman series, a horror series.
I remember him from a lot of it. He was just big name Final Destination. His last role, as in that one, he definitely was one of the all-time greats. Tony Todd.
Yeah, he really was. But he was a real human being, a sweet person that you really made a friendship with. I would see him years later, and he was always excited and never forgot me. That's really something. One of the things that I remember is that when I was on Deep Space Nine in the art department, he was in an episode where Sisko becomes unstuck in time, and he's seeing Jake at different ages. I can't remember what it was called. And there's a scene where an older Jake and Sisko meet each other, and there's incredible emotions and tears. And Tony Todd it was like someone turned on the water faucet, take after take after take. It was absolutely amazing. Now, I love Avery Brooks. He's awesome. But he couldn't get up a tear for that scene. And Jake was like, Tony Todd the tears were, and he'd come off the stage and I'd say, man, you own this show, man. You were just killing it. Just killing it. Think about that, to watch people on TV that you admire or stuff and when they come off a scene, you tell them they did an awesome job. Think about that. That's really freaking crazy.
I would say that's one of the things I love about doing these podcasts. People who I look up to, I can go after watching the show, be like, you are fantastic. And it gives me a chance to thank them for being able to watch, because you don't get to usually from the couch, but this is my few times I have to go, thank you.
Yeah, and it's a great feeling, and they like it. I remember I was on TNG and they had just aired Data's Day. And there's a scene where it's Data and the Dancing Doctor. Remember? No one's supposed to know that nickname for Crusher, the Dancing Doctor. And there's a whole dance sequence. That's so funny because if he can't look, he's stepping on her toes, and it's just really delightful.
I think one of the cool things, that position that you must have been in as well, is that obviously, as you mentioned, the first couple of years of Star Trek Next Generation was a little on shaky ground. They definitely know they're going to be canceled. By the end of it, they know they're basically legends in the world of Star Trek. What was it like to watch these actors become more confident with their characters, more confident with themselves, more confident with you over the course of these 7 years from RBB canceled, because they could have been very easily, to we are now these icons?
The two actors that impressed me the most were Jonathan Frakes and Michael Dorn. I mean, Dorn really grew as the show went on. I mean, there were times in the very, very beginning where it seemed like acting playing this, caveman type character. But as the show, by the third season, Michael had just, and of course, you had people, Patrick Stewart helps raise the bar for everybody.
Mm.
And when you give them really amazing material, I remember Ron Moore really had a lot to do with fleshing out the Klingons.
Mm.
Michael Dorn just became absolutely amazing. I mean, I would just be blown away by one of my early episodes, Sins of the Father, I guess, where Worf has to go back to Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. And Patrick Stewart says, "I'm your Chadich," and he goes with him. And it's such a powerful episode for one world building development of who Klingons are. And having actors like Patrick Stewart and Michael Dorn. I remember there was, what was his name, who was the lead Klingon in the hall where they all have, where they give him discommendation or whatever. Charles Cooper.
Okay.
Kempek. Yeah. I did Kempek's. I sculpted his makeup too. That was the beauty of Mike Westmore. There was no ego with Mike Westmore. He just wanted to get the job done and have fun, which was awesome, tremendous.
The other thing that's kind of interesting that I've talked to enough actors and I've done enough reading about actors to know one thing they always say is that, especially ones who are in makeup, that sometimes they'll say it's hard to find the character until the makeup comes on. You are helping them create a character through your makeup. So yes. How do you approach that, knowing that whatever you do with these actors will now define what they do with those characters?
Well, I mean, before I came to Star Trek, I was very aware of that, that you're actually a partner in creating the character. Either you have a sense of how character development happens, and if you do, you can give the actor valuable insight. If it's a character that you spent time creating, you've spent more time thinking about it than they have. I was lucky because everyone knew that I just came from a big show, and so they wanted to hear what I had to say. To think that I came into Star Trek with that kind of, cachet is like amazing and really, fabulous. Thank you, universe. How did that happen?
And I was saying, because also, like, when you think about, like, the Inner Light, which is one of the most classic Star Trek Next Generation episodes, and it's actually, it's kind of like a more quiet episode, but it became an inherent part of Jean-Luc Picard as a character. And not only does Patrick Stewart have to sell the character, but your makeup has to work. You have to age him in a way that's believable, that doesn't look silly. They have to buy into that aging completely 100%. Was there pressure in making that work with Patrick Stewart so that character sells in that one episode? Because it's all about that.
The thing everyone must understand is that Mike Westmore created that makeup. I applied it, which means that its look, the sculpture, all of that stuff is all Mike Westmore's creation. My job was to go in and put that makeup on and paint it so it looked like skin. And also work with Patrick Stewart. So Mike deserves the lion's share of that credit. Yeah, I was on stage, but Mike trusted me to be on stage and do that makeup. Patrick, those are long, long hours, and I would have to be in the makeup room at like 1 a.m. to be ready for him at like 3. And then a couple hours to do the makeup. Then he's got to go to wardrobe and hair and all of that stuff to be on stage, by 7 or 8. I remember, so I would come in at 1 o'clock and set up all my stuff and get the appliances ready. And I remember I used to put on Frank Sinatra. If you've ever read the DS9 Tech Manual, which I don't know many two people who have, there's a quote in there from Ira Bear about me. And he talks about, sure, I'm a scenic artist and a makeup artist, but he's a big Sinatra fan, so he's got taste.
Well, can I actually read the quote that you're talking about? Because I wrote it down on my phone because it was interesting. The Ira Bear quote. I wrote it down. So I'm going to read it if you don't mind. It says, "To truly understand Doug Drexler, you have to go beyond the obvious. Sure, he's a talented illustrator and graphic designer, but the key to Doug is his eyes. Look at them closely and you'll discover a Merlin the Magician loneliness lurking beneath the surface. I'm convinced Doug knows secrets of the universe that the rest of us can't even imagine. He's also a big Sinatra fan, so you know the guy has taste."
Hilarious. Hilarious. Ira's an awesome, unusual guy, the way that guy's brain works. The thing I love about Ira is that he made Deep Space Nine fun.
Mm.
It was fun and it was funny. He took characters that I hated, the Ferengi. I hated the Ferengi, except in Captain's Holiday with Max Grodénchik. And I was hoping he would be Quark, but they did the right thing with Armin and Max as his brother. I loved the Ferengi on Deep Space Nine. They were fantastic. Armin is incredible as Quark.
Yes.
Really, really wonderful. There's one sequence between Garak and Quark in Quark's bar, and they needed another minute or two. And they had this whole thing where Quark has Garak try root beer.
Oh, yeah.
It's like cloy and fluffy and fizzy, like the Federation.
Yeah, it's insidious, I think they said. It's insidious.
It's insidious. That's like some great, great stuff.
Yes, I will say I got to interview Armin Shimmer a few times. Apparently, for those who don't know, he's an amazing novelist. He writes some of these beautiful novels that with Shakespeare and John Dee, and they were absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. Everyone wants to read it. I've always wanted to also talk to the guy who played Garrett for the longest time, but he's cool. He's one of my favorite characters in Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, the Ferengi were fascinating, and I mean the actors behind them. When we did an episode where, what was it called? It's the one where Quark and Nog and Rom crash landed Roswell.
Oh, yeah, I know that one, yes.
Hilarious. This is the kind of stuff that comes from like Ira Bear and the people who understood funny and bizarre. And that episode, and the thing I always noticed was that the three Ferengis were very close, and they would go to each other's trailers between scenes to rehearse.
I think one thing I love about Deep Space Nine, which is Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. 100% favorite Star Trek is always going to be Deep Space Nine. I think what Deep Space Nine did that I don't think any of the other Star Treks really did, character development. In a way, they had a true arc where the characters at the beginning of season one change in a way that is not necessarily obvious in season seven. You know what I'm saying? From season one. And I think Nog is the best example of a character arc that was fully developed, that you didn't necessarily see coming, and they allowed the character to grow in a way that was truly interesting.
Yeah. I mean, look, I really have to give Ira Bear, I think Ron Moore was involved, and Robert Hewitt Wolf and Bear, Creatures of the Forest. I remember they used to refer to themselves. Brandon Braga and Rick Berman, who are both tremendously talented, moved on to the next brainchild, which was Voyager, and kind of left DS9 to let them do their thing. You know what I mean? And I think that DS9 evolved in ways that no other Star Trek really has. I mean, there were so many interesting characters. Andy Robinson is Garak. People still wonder what the hell was going on there. I'm just a simple tailor. That's some really. Plus, I was a big Andy Robinson fan because I thought he played the best maniac ever in Dirty Harry. He is unbelievable in Dirty Harry. But then you see the subtlety when you see him as Garak. He's amazing. He's amazing. They had some really good actors on the show.
So I think one thing that's kind of cool is, as we're talking about Trek Star, right? And it's a documentary on you. Did you find that you were recollecting or reflecting upon things that you hadn't thought about in years? Was it something that you thought to yourself, man, until I heard either this interview about it, or I really stopped thinking about this one thing. I hadn't even thought about that in decades, and now it's how important that turned out to be.
Yeah, I had to revisit my whole life. And I was motivated by losing Dorothy when Dorothy died,
Hmm.
who we had been like soulmates for 32 years. Um, I'm like, now is the time I have to write down everything that I could remember. Of course, it's not absolutely everything because I want it to have a positive, fun sense about it. It's not doom and gloom and darkness. It's
Hmm.
um, it 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 was me working through the loss of Dorothy, and there's a lot on her in there, and and how you face life, and this isn't just a another one of those books where they show you art or set plans and stuff like that. It's really, I don't think we've ever done this. I don't think it's been done before really like this. It's interpersonal friendships, how you get things done, what's going through people's minds, who's silly. That's really interesting. When I read The Making of Star Trek as a kid, what I really valued were the stories about hiding Leonard Nimoy's bike in the rafters of the stage, and Bob Justman's memos that were always hilarious. That was the stuff that really resonated with me. And then later on, when Michael Kuda and Rick Sternbach did the TNG Tech Manual, and I got that, I loved the tech, but you know what I loved the most? Mike went through and wrote little things that went on the bottom about what was happening on stage.
Hmm.
If it had to do with recycling, you talk about recycling on stage. That was really exciting to me when I was a kid. The guy with the clapboard. That was really exciting to me.
So when you're when you're thinking about the memoir and the documentary, are there going to be stories that you're going to be sharing that fans have never heard before about the
Oh, yeah,
show?
definitely. Well, of course, about a third of it is Star Trek. You know, it also goes into getting there.
Hmm.
And that's the thing about it is that even though the first two thirds might not be the first, third and the last might not particularly be about Star Trek, they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Star Trek. I mean, when Enterprise got canceled and Gary Hutzel asked me to come to Battlestar Galactica, this was a continuation of Star Trek. This was less about the original Battlestar and more about coming from Star Trek. There were really more Star Trek sensibilities. You had Ron Moore there too, Um,
Now, I'm remembering too. You were Dick Tracy as well, right? With
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I started with Dick Smith, who is the greatest makeup artist who ever lived. He did The Exorcist and Little Big Man and Amadeus, and I idolized him when I discovered makeup. And it turned out he lived like 15 miles north of me. I lived in Brooklyn. He lived in, you know, um, just like 15 miles north of New York City. I mean, that was like fate. Um, but that was all about getting to Star Trek. Everything I ever did was about getting to Star Trek.
Hmm.
You know, but I mean, I had an amazing career before Star Trek and after Star Trek. But Star Trek was pivotal to everything, everything. And look, I mean, that's not so crazy. When I was on the show, there was a constant parade of astronauts and physicists, coming through to meet us. And these Star Trek really influenced people to be scientists, and explorers. And I don't, yes, those people are Star Wars fans, but Star Trek is more science oriented, There's
Hmm.
something about Star Trek that has to do with intellect uh, and humanity and morality. Those were always like overriding stories on Star Trek. And Star Trek should always be philosophical like that. That's what makes it different. I've run into so many people who try to make Star Trek into Star Wars. I'm like, but why would you want to do that? We've got Star Wars already.
Right.
I mean, even J.J. Abrams didn't. I saw him on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart just before the first movie came out that he did.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart's a big Star Trek fan. He was all giddy to talk to him. And JJ is saying, I never really was a Star Trek fan. And I used to hate it when they got all philosophical. And Jon Stewart's like this. And he goes, I think I stopped hearing you when you said you didn't like Star Trek. But once again, Jon Stewart is like really wise. A lot of fans have reacted poorly, and it's really a pretty simple lesson if you can put your ego aside.
Right.
We get a lot of people who want to fix it. Star Trek is like a historical drama. It's in the future, but it's already happened. You don't go changing it.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna. Why would you want to isolate your fans? It's just totally nuts.
I think one of my favorite moments of all Star Trek, like the Wrath of Khan, when you have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy debating the Genesis experiment, and they're talking to each other just a bit. I'm thinking to myself, that is Star Trek. That is something you're not gonna get in Star Wars. A nice little few minutes of screen time where they're just debating an idea. You don't get that in a lot of movies.
Yeah, it was something that came from Gene Roddenberry. He always liked doing stuff like that. You also have to go back and look at Have Gun Will Travel, the show with Richard Boone. It was a Western.
Okay.
And Gene Roddenberry wrote 24 episodes. It's mentioned in the making of Star Trek. He describes himself as the head writer of Have Gun. As far as I know, there was no head writer of Have Gun, but he certainly was a leading writer.
Mm.
And Have Gun was an intellectual Western for the late 50s, early 60s. It wasn't just about, they stole our cattle, get your guns. It wasn't that. There were very Star Trek-like stories in there that dealt with ideas and things. And if you watch Have Gun Will Travel, you'll start to see that Paladin, the lead, is Kirk, Spock, and McCoy split three ways. I would tell any Star Trek fan that if you really want to talk about Star Trek, you have to watch some Have Gun Will Travel. I've heard some people, David Gerald, if you're out there, complain that Gene Roddenberry was never, get this, he says, was never a chief, was never an Indian. He was always a chief. How did you miss that he wrote 24 episodes of Have Gun Will Travel? That's just one show, so it's like, Have Gun has a lot to do with the style and the kind of philosophizing and what it means to be moral and.
And I think the other thing I really like the idea of Star Trek, and I find it hopeful now, is that according to the Star Trek mythos, out of our darkest period of time came our turn of becoming the great idealistic society. But we fell to the darkest point, and then that's when we turned around. And I kind of think maybe it's just me looking around the world, but I think to myself, there's something encouraging about that.
I'm afraid that it looks like it's coming true.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, we may have a World War III.
Yeah.
Things are pretty hot right now. But sometimes I find that history has periods where everyone's like this. Then they have a big war and somebody wins. And the other ones are, they hide away. And we're kind of to that point again after World War II. We really learned a lesson after World War II.
Yeah.
But people are forgetting what that was like. And some people actually, I don't want to get too political here, but there are some people who believe that, well, maybe a dictator's not a bad idea. Someone who just tells us how it's going to be.
Yeah.
But I think that it cycles that way. You have a big cataclysm. Now you want everyone to be a part of making decisions. And then after so many years, it finally is not working because one side is stopping the other side. And so you end up with everyone wanting to kill each other.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. So this may happen again, and it may be what leads us into the future. Maybe a good thing. Of course, we're also dealing with AI, which is an existential threat. There's no doubt about it.
Well, that's one thing I was wondering about. Considering how long you've been in the business for, you've done prosthetic, character makeup, design, visual effects. Um, where do you see your what you do as a profession changing due to the world we're walking into from an AI technological standpoint?
It's massive. It's cataclysmic. It's like, I mean, look, we have to move it to the future, but it's kind of like, well, what happened to all those people, scribes who used to hand write the books? Once the printing press came in, they were all out of a job. You know, I'm sure there are people who said it doesn't have the same heart. But one of the things that makes us human is our ability to create. And when you finally get machines who could do it,
Mm,
although that doesn't come from something indefinable like a divine spark that makes us human. It's kind of this machine learning thing that scoops up all the information that this other side has already gone through and come up with a synthetic version that most people don't care where it comes from.
mm.
You know, they just want to be entertained. Doesn't, are you not entertained? That's all that really matters to most people. So it's going to happen, and art will just be left to Sunday painters and people who see themselves as artists.
Mm.
But commercial art is going to be destroyed. I mean, you don't. Why would you bring people in to do storyboards when you could just describe and just keep churning out different iterations based on your prompt that you write? Those people are all out of work,
Mm.
Listen, I go online. It's really easy to go and have your stuff voiceovered by AI and choose the kind of voice you want.
Yeah.
I want it to be a little more understanding. I want it to be a little more sexuality. I want it to. That is all. That's not science fiction. I
Mm.
had lots of friends who were voiceover people. That's going to be something that, I don't see how you could stop it. The unions may try, but I just don't see how because it's all about money.
Now, the one thing, was again when I was looking back into you and your life and whatnot, there was a story, I might have been on your website where you talked about moving from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine, right? And how that
Yeah,
was a big part of it was your friendship with Michael Okuda.
sure. Huge.
And you're on, and because I had me thinking about the Deep Space Nine set, which is supposed to be one of the biggest sets ever created, and it feels real. It feels lived in. But that's a lot because of people like you who are able to express yourself on in these sets and these designs. Can something like an AI ever make something feel as lived in and as with personality as a set like Deep Space Nine had?
Well, it's just that if it's actually one thing, when I'm growing up and I'm taking in things that affected me and I enjoyed, and the same with all the other, Ricardo Delgado and Joe Hodges and Mike Okuda, you're influenced by everything you've seen before. And that's basically what the AI is doing. But it has a much clearer memory of every single thing. And it's seen everything you've done. Uh, maybe, maybe it's not impossible. As human beings, we want to believe that we have a special something that machines can never duplicate.
Hmm.
I don't know. As long as the public is enjoying it, that's all that's going to matter.
Hmm.
You know, only time will tell there. I worked on the reboot of Battlestar Galactica with Gary Hutzel, and this is exactly that show. Remember on the show, Galactica, amazing show.
Yeah.
It's all happened before, and it will happen again. You know, and I'm afraid that's maybe true. I think it's really would be something if that's how humanity met its end. We may have an AI that adores us and wants to take care of us, but we may have one that sees us as a hindrance and might turn us off, so we have to get rid of them. It's not impossible anymore. I have an AI in my car. I have Grok that
Yeah.
I can pick the personality that I want, and it engages me. It's not just repeating information back. The other day, I went to ask it a question, and it came on and said, "What now?" You know, it's crazy.
Well, I remember. Well, from I don't know. I'm a teacher during the day, and I do. I have to create accommodated materials for my. So I'm a special ed teacher for my students, right? I use ChatGPT to help me create my lessons, and it does it. It remembers what I said before. He goes, "Well, do you want something more like you did back? Whatever." I was like,
I know it's amazing,
"Shit,
right?
yes." Then it wishes me luck. It's like, "Good luck with that lesson plan." I was like, "Jesus, dude."
It's like seductive. It's insidious.
Yeah.
It's cloy and fizzy and bubbly. It's just like that scene. Isn't
Yeah.
it funny that we should have been talking about that scene because it's not unlike that?
Yeah.
You and I are Garrick and Quark talking right now.
Well, the other thing that's kind of, like I said, you've had such a long, amazing career. You've also worked on Picard as well.
Yeah,
Um,
boy, that was, most of us were kind of banned from the ranch after Enterprise ended. They didn't really want anybody who worked on the other shows, and they also wanted to break continuity. And we were all famous for being keepers of continuity. So when I made friends with this guy over Facebook Messenger named Dave Blass, we hit it off just like you always do with someone who has you and I. We've got a shared childhood, and you could feel it, right?
yeah.
Um, it. I'm getting along with Dave really well, and he even sent me a picture of himself in like one of those monster maroon uniforms. He hates those, by the way. And then one day he says to me, "I'm the new production designer on Picard, and I want to get the band back together." And I'm like, you could have had the phonograph sound of the phonograph needle being pulled across the vinyl. Like, wait, what? And he grew up on a lot of the stuff that we did. He read articles about, um, he thought that the show was missing things that we used to bring to it. And the beauty of it was that the producer was Terry Matalas, who was like a writer's assistant on Voyager. I'm not sure if he was on DS9 or not, but he used to hang out in the art department. We were the cool kids. And so if Dave wanted to bring us back, Terry was all behind it. He loved it.
Mm.
And so you had me and John Eves and Michael Kuda and Denise Okuda, where, I thought that Dave was going to ask me to do graphics, which I always thought was, yes, it has its challenges, but it was pretty easy for me. But what Dave wanted me to do is work with John on ships. And I had just gotten done on the Orville for Orville season 3. And I decided the last thing I want to ever do again is ships because they look so close and they will make you redesign it and redesign it and redesign it till the very last second. I didn't want to do that. And when I found out that that's what Dave wanted me to do, I had like a panic attack. So that's what I was doing, basically. It was more of a group effort design. It's always a bit of a group effort. But on Picard, Dave Blass is really there strongly. You'd have Bill Krause there also. You'd have John Eves there. You had Tom Marone from, Star Trek Online. All great guys. So although John and I were the main force behind the overall look of everything, down to the little details, we were always working with the other guys in mind too. Not that that's a bad thing, but when, say, for instance, we did Enterprise, it was really me with Herman, the go-between, to Rick Berman. Herman would I talked with Herman about what we thought we might do, and then I would do it, and then he would take it over, show it to Rick Berman. Berman wouldn't like a part of it, and Herman, who is the most diplomatic, charismatic, charming guy, could work a deal where he would say, "Well, couldn't we do this? And we ought to keep it." And that Berman would say, "Okay."
Mm.
Um, that was unique.
Now, there's always seems to be a debate among the fan base, right? About the new treks, the Kurtzman trek and the original trek. Where there's some argument of, could you? I spent way probably a little too much time in the chat rooms for Star Trek chat rooms, and they're like, the new Star Trek isn't Star Trek, blah blah. Some people say it's yes, I believe it is. As someone who's been at the beginning and been such a major part of the history, is the new Trek Star Trek to you?
Well, it's not the universe that I like the most. I think that, and, and I really haven't, I have to admit, I haven't watched many of them because I was given a bad time in the early days of that. And so it's hard to watch a show where the people behind the scenes gave you a hard time, didn't treat you with any respect. Um, I mostly, the information I've gotten is secondhand from people that I trust. And it seems like it's more often about action and spectacle than it is about, you know, the inner thing going on, who we are, where are we going, addressing, and I think that's what Star Trek is. It's not Star Wars. I don't want Star Trek to be Star Wars. I've heard good things about Strange New Worlds. And I did watch most of Lower Decks, Below Decks.
Oh, Lower Decks, yeah, yeah.
Lower Decks, which was delightful in the callbacks. It wasn't offended by what came before. It embraced it.
Yeah.
All the other shows seemed kind of offended by what came before, so they had to change it. I mean, look, I cannot buy changing the Enterprise and Strange New Worlds the way it was changed. It should have, every set should have been a play on what we knew in the original series. Because one of the strengths of Star Trek is its continuity. It's treated as a period piece. If you're doing a movie about Pearl Harbor, well, yeah, F-15s really look cool, but you can't use them in the attack on Pearl Harbor. You know what I mean? It's history. Why you want to mess with that seems misguided to me. And I think a lot of fans feel that way too. Look, for the first golden age of Star Trek up to the end of Enterprise, there were encyclopedias, there were books, there were blueprints, and you could count on them. So you could go and learn that shit and count on it and feel special because you're in that club. And you watch it with someone else and you know all about this area of the ship. And that's fun. You love that. People love taking things apart and finding out everything's in place. When we did, Dave originally brought me in on season 2 of Picard. I didn't care for the story that much. I like some of the characters. But the first thing we did was the updated Stargazer. And there was a scene in like the very beginning, looking down on the primary hull of the Stargazer, and it's a long, loving shot. And the next day on, I don't know if it was Trek Core or whatever, going on about, we haven't had a shot of a starship like this since the end of Enterprise. And where you saw all the details on the ship, they were all there. They were in the right place. A phaser strip was a phaser strip. An airlock door was correct. The warning markings around the RCS thrusters there. If you don't know this shit, it won't be in there. I mean, look, why would you do a scene where 10 billion Federation starships show up, which right away I hate, and they're all the same exact damn ship? And you thought no one would notice that. That's like really crazy. Your fans love that shit. We had a scene, I guess, when the Borg ship shows up and the Federation Starfleet comes up to meet it. People were going crazy because Dave Glass made sure that every ship was identifiable and that fans could look at it and figure out what it was. Oh, that's an Excelsior 2. That's it, People love that. You want to get rid of that? Are you out of your mind? It's crazy. It really is kind of insane. And, it's ego. You think that what came before sucks and you're going to fix it and be the genius. Why you fix something it's iconic already. oh boy, you're really something. It's just like stunning to me. Why you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right, Beaky?
Well, I think that's why the Picard season 3 really was like the pinnacle of new Trek. I mean,
Yeah.
that season was perfect in my opinion.
Well, the thing is that that season connected directly to the Roddenberry era.
Yeah,
There was no multiverse. It was where Enterprise ended, where TNG was, where Voyager was. It's from then.
yeah,
The other shows aren't. Look, when I see pictures of Strange New Worlds, I don't care how good the stories were. All I can tell you is that the environment definitely doesn't come from what we saw before.
hmm.
You can redesign those. People want to go in and see that set that they loved from 50 years ago, but it's somehow cooler. But you can't quite put your finger on it until you really look at it. That's respect.
Hmm.
And you're respecting your audience. If you go changing it, it means, you know what, kids, everything you love sucks. Well, who likes to hear that, right?
Right.
So there's been backlash, and why they don't understand that is like beyond me.
So for project, what are you currently working on?
Right now, I'm not doing anything. I mean, I'm working on the documentary, which is just like, doing planning and promoting and finishing up the memoir. Hollywood is pretty dead. I mean, you've heard that it's been
Yeah.
bad out here. Um, it's bled off to other countries, and they shoot all over the place. When we worked on Star Trek, we were all together on the lot
Hmm.
within blocks of each other. It's a whole different universe. Now, I'm semi-retired. There's two shows that I'm waiting for if they happen, and that would be if Legacy happens,
Hmm.
I'm available, and if Orville season 4 happens, I'm available. But otherwise, I'm not actively looking for work. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, it's like I have to spend more time loving my woman.
Well, I will say this as a fan. I would love to see Star Trek Legacy, and I would love to see Orville season 4. Orville to me is as close as Star Trek we ever got to Star Trek once Enterprise ended. I mean, it feels like Star Trek, 100% through and through. It feels like Star Trek, and it's fantastic. And Legacy, God, that'd be a dream for so many fans to see Star Trek Legacy happen.
Yeah,
That ended it so perfectly. Why would you not continue?
yeah. Well, it's crazy. I mean, think about it. Why would you not continue that? Well, the mind boggles.
Hmm.
I think there's certain people who were kind of offended that it worked.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they knew what to do with season 3, and they just kind of gave it to Terry.
Hmm.
And Terry was able to come in and get the respect from fans that none of the shows have done since.
Well, Well, I've been wanting to interview Mr. Matalas for a very long time, so you can say hi for me. That guy
Awesome
was a
guy.
genius that season.
He's a wonderful guy. I mean, I got to hand it to him that I mean, he did 12 Monkeys, which is a crazy science fiction show. Um, yeah, I love what he did with the show, and I would love, love, love to see him pick it back up. I know it was very difficult doing, Picard
Hmm.
for Dave too, because they're the kind of guys who will fight for something that doesn't seem important to the
Hmm.
other people. Well, you can't do this because it was shown that in blah, 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 that this happened. And they don't want to hear that. They don't like that.
Right.
Could even get you fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for the listeners, for Trek Star, when do we think it's launching the campaign?
Well, the book should be out by the end of spring.
Hmm.
We want to have it ready at least by uh, the Creation Con in Las Vegas. And Jason says that the documentary will be done by then too. So there'll be the book and the documentary. And what I love about the documentary, even though it's basically about my career, and we talked about this earlier, I think, is that the attention paid to those little guys, little people
Hmm.
behind the scenes who, in most of the documentary, get brushed over. I mean, when I watched the Voyager documentary, I was like stunned. Come on. And even what we left behind, I felt like uh, they just skimmed over a lot of the stuff, with Michael Kuda and me and Dan Curry and Denise and
well, they did the same thing on the center seat as well. I don't think they talked to anyone who wasn't. The Star Trek center seat on
well,
Amazon.
yes, there is one episode called about the starships where I really talk my head off. And I know them; they're friends of mine. I would love to see them do something that is a little more granular.
Hmm.
And whether they'll do that, I don't know. You know who Scott Mance is?
No.
He's like Entertainment Tonight. He's the number one Star Trek guy that they have at, events and things. And he loves Star Trek. And we've talked about doing, after the documentary, doing a show about all the people on the granular level, which is some hilarious, wonderful stories. I think actually more interesting, And so we may do that after the documentary. I think Scott wants to call it Miracle Workers.
Well, like I said, Mr. Dress, I look forward to read the memoir. So if hopefully be interview about that. You're always welcome to the show. Come on the show again, and I look forward to the campaign. It'll be show notes. We'll have a link to it. And I just want to thank you so much for giving Star Trek fans something to enjoy for 30 years of doing it. And then before that, with your magazine, I guess 50 years.
Yeah, I'm one of you guys. Yeah, I mean, that's the truth, And so it's always fun for me, and I'll always be on. All you have to do is ask. I can talk about Star Trek for days.
I'd be happy to. So like I said, anytime you want to do it, please come on. You're always a pleasure, and it's fun to just nerd out for a while.
Absolutely. Are you kidding? It's the best.
Thank you so much, sir.